Okay, this next session, we are going to focus on the personal mixing side of our system. Again, we're able to use these M-48s with any console out there, but we want to focus right now on what it means to use with our consoles. A little bit of practical, more than theory, example of what's really behind personal mixing. Some of you are using it already, some of you have not used it yet. So let's just take this time right now and go through why we bother with personal mixing. How did it come about? Well, this is a traditional monitoring setup that you see in front of you. You've got console at the front of house, and you also have a console in the monitor position. And that feeds wedges across the stage. You see it all the time in certainly the older tours, and in certainly a lot of some are still using this approach. What that requires is someone manning the front of house station and someone manning the monitor console itself and providing the mix to the musicians. But as you can see in most, certainly church applications and many others, clubs and small events, you don't have that board, the monitor position, or even someone to volunteer. Sometimes it's hard to find people just to run the main sound. So the front of house engineer is tasked with not only making sure the room sounds good, but an hour before he can or she can focus on that, he's got to make all the musicians happy. They're asking for more of me, more of this, more of that, more of the other thing. And sometimes, if you're like in my past at least, it's at least 45 minutes is sound check, right? I think so. It's tough using wedges when you're the only person helping that happen. So the other challenge then, even going that spot with wedges, is that now you have stage monitors that are creating noise. We've all had that experience where the sound is coming off the back wall, wherever it may be. You can imagine in this environment here, if the stage was up here, all the sound would be just coming off of that wall. How more crazy would it be, right, in the round here, if there were wedges all the way around the whole stage? The people sitting here would only hear the sound from the guitarist position. The person here would only hear the drum monitor. The person here would only... So the wedges create more noise. And when you're able to analyze that, what's happening in the room, sometimes your room, one of the biggest problems is stage noise. I've been at many concert venues. In fact, one not too long ago in Mexico City where there were decibel police, at some of the places where they don't want the sound to get too loud. So they came in and said, it's running way too loud here at this festival. And they asked to turn it down. The guy said, I can't turn it down. He actually turned the mains down, and the sound coming from the stage was still at about 96. And I think the limit was 96 or something. So even with the mains off, it was way too high. So you want to get that stage sound, that wash, down to as low as you can. In fact, ideally the best is your loudest acoustic instrument. It might be a piano, it might be a voice, maybe it's a drum kit. And that's why the Roland V drum kit is ideal in certainly rooms like this, is that eliminates your loudest acoustic instrument at that point. And now at this position here, our loudest instruments now are voices and acoustic guitars, basically, at this point. Very easy to manage. Now your room noise before house is down at, even when everyone's playing full on, is going to be down in the 60s. So we move to the in-ear application where we take the wedges off the floor and put them into our ears. Just a little smaller, that's all. So we're able to take, you sometimes see the note IEMs, in-ear monitors is what that refers to, and we put them into our ears. So we're able to reduce that monitor wash that comes from the stage. We can even be totally wireless if we need to be, just a pack that you can run with a receiver at the other end. It does require trust if you're using a monitor engineer, and that's what the pro high-end tours use. They have a monitor engineer that can run directly to their ears. One of the negatives sometimes can be the isolation of the musician. You're used to the wedge coming, used to side fills, you're used to all this noise on the stage. Maybe even as a church, you're used to the sound coming back to you from the congregation singing and participating. That's very real. We're going to talk about how we've dealt with some of that in our personal mixing solution. So when you do that, though, put the sound into your ears, you're able to eliminate the wash from the room. So now your sound is just going to be from your overhead and your main sound system. So usually when systems go in, tests aren't fully run with monitor wedges running full up. So now you're back to the original design, hopefully, if it's been a good design, back to the original design of how the room should have sounded with the speakers that you put in. So hopefully that makes that clear. So just a point of clarification, though, we have term personal monitor and personal mixers. And the personal monitor, we refer to what goes in your ear. That's the monitor. It's like a TV screen. It's like a speaker, like a headphone. Speakers monitor into your ear. The mixer is what we control the monitor with. And just a side point, there's nothing that says you can't run a personal mixer to a small wedge. And we'll see later on that, in fact, in this venue, we do that for some of the vocalists. They run a soft wedge here from the unit. That could be done for numbers of reasons. But so you can still run it to a wedge. It's just more controlled by the musician at that point in time. So who's using the M-48s? Just before we go talk about them, what we're proud of is the fact that this is the first personal mixing system that's been adopted by the high-end pro industry, like that top-level pro who hasn't typically wanted to touch personal mixing up until the Rolands came out. So you can see some of the shows, a lot of award show bands that play, including Emmy Awards. Any of those bands that play for shows are typically using these a lot. Celine Dion show in Vegas, this whole string section used them. The events at the White House where you're in the East Wing, it's a very narrow room, very wide and very narrow. You don't have room for monitor consoles. You don't have space for wedges. So in fact, a lot of the stuff happens in another room, and just the musicians are there in that. And that's for those PBS specials like Motown or what have you. And then my church, small, portable churches across the nation and around the world, and churches and clubs and schools, colleges, studios are all using them. So they're very accessible to the regular weekend warrior types and amateurs that are playing all the way through up. So it speaks well for the fact that it's easy to use. And that's one of the challenges we had, is we want it to appeal to the pro and they can tweak and get the perfect mix, but we don't want that person who's only plays once every 6 weeks to be intimidated by it. And so there's ways in which we allow that to not happen by making sure only the lights are on for the functions that are enabled at that time. So Mike Sessler is a blogger. Church Tech Arts, I believe, is the name of the blog, as well as a writer for church production, a system designer, is a lead tech at Coast Hills Church, I believe, in Aliso Viejo, California. He introduced this to his team a year or two ago, and with some certainly higher-end players, there's some initial resistance, especially if you've used wedges for 20 years or 30 or 40. So let's listen to Mike as he talks about some of the challenges and what the reaction was to introducing M-48s to his team.
We had several musicians who were pretty much opposed to it. Our history as a church is we've had a full-time, or not full-time, but a contracted monitor engineer pretty much for the history of the church. So they are really used to having their own monitor engineer with wedges. That's been their history. Some of them have had experiences with personal monitoring systems in the past and were not excited about going that route. They didn't like the way they sounded. They didn't think the flexibility was there. They weren't thrilled that that's the direction that we were going. The musicians that were kind of neutral to a little bit enthused about the M48s have just been blown away by it. We had several of those on stage last week. They were completely excited to the point of sharing mixing tips with each other. Hey, have you tried turning up the ambient mic? Have you tried adding reverb to the snare? It sounds great. They're super excited. So we've got some great musicians here, Coast. I'm really blessed to work with these guys. Not only they're phenomenally talented, but they're just great individuals, great people as well. And we had one guy who is a touring musician, plays for some major Christian acts, and has used other personal monitoring systems in the past. And when I started planting the seeds that we were going to be getting away from a full-time monitor engineer to a personal mixing based system, he was pretty skeptical of it. He really didn't want to go that way. Like I said, he's had the experiences in the past. They haven't been good. He didn't really want to do it. And he tried on multiple occasions to talk me out of going that way. And when I was able to integrate the M-48 system into it and roll it out the way we did, about the first weekend that he had been on it, he had been using them for literally 45 minutes, basically through sound check. And at the end of the first song of the actual rehearsal, I was coming up on stage and he said, come here. And he called me over and I thought, oh boy, he's going to tell me he doesn't like it. We're going the wrong way. He said, first of all, this sounds way better than I was expecting it to. And second of all, if we have another open channel, could we hang a mic over the stage somewhere so we can hear ourselves talk when we're, between songs? And I grabbed the ambient mic and I turned it up and I said, how about that? He said, oh, perfect. And, from that point on, he was pretty sold. Other than wanting a couple little minor tweaks here and there, he's been pretty happy with the overall system and has adopted it well. And I think he's going to really enjoy the control that he has now over his mix. We've been using them, phasing them in over the last 3 weekends. And, this last weekend we had sound check done. It used to take us better part of an hour to do sound check with a monitor engineer. We had sound check done in about, 10 minutes. And the band was thrilled because they got an extra 40 minutes of rehearsal time. And they were able to run every song twice. They were able to tweak a little bit. And so they were pretty happy. And when the musicians are happy with their mix, they play better. They play more confidently because they can actually hear what they want to hear. And if they need a tweak of something, they don't need to try to signal the monitor engineer, get his attention, lose focus of playing. They can just reach over and turn it up or turn it down. And I think it's giving us a significantly better sound in the house because we've eliminated 6 to 7 wedges on stage. We've dropped our stage volume from 86, 88 dB at front of house to, with the mains off, that's just the monitor volume, down to, probably somewhere in the 60s. So from that standpoint alone, the clarity that we're getting in the house is significantly improved. Workflow wise, it's been great. Took a little bit of getting used to. Now it took us 3 weeks to get it dialed in, which again is not bad for a system of this, a shift of this scope. So I would say overall we are thrilled. It's actually exceeded my expectations of how good it sounds, how good of an implementation it is, and what the results have been.
So there you have some of Mike Sessler's comments there and his experience. So the first thing we talk about when we talk about the M48s is that it's the musician's choice. It's what the musicians want to see. So you certainly see in some of our promotion, we're going after the musician. It's not something necessarily that all the technical people jump to all the time. It's often sometimes musicians that find it. So if you have some coming to you already and you haven't explored it, then certainly we're able to assist you in trying it out, seeing if it works. You'll see on our website some more materials when it comes to musicians that have had experiences. I won't play all of this. I'll just set it up. This is the Drew Bodine Band, or a band out of a church, Central Christian, I believe is the name, in Las Vegas area. And they were a little skeptical. You can hear Drew here.
So Sunday afternoon, I arrived at NAB 2010. We brought all of our guitars and gear in, and we come on stage getting ready to sound check. And I see these Roland RSS M48 sitting on the stage, and I'd never heard them. I had no idea what they were, but I was a little skeptical because I have used personal in-ear monitors, and some of them have not sounded so great. So I wasn't actually really looking forward to it until I plugged in the M48 and started creating a mix. All of a sudden, I realized all the options you could have on there. I mean, the ability to change the frequency of the mids, the ability to add reverb on every single channel, to control the levels of every single channel. Within probably 5 to 10 minutes, I had an amazing sounding mix, better than any personal in-ear monitor system I've ever used and had access to. And the greatest thing about it is you can store different presets, and then when you get back on stage, if you've got 5 or 6 people singing, or you've got a song where somebody's playing a lead solo and you want to turn them up a little bit, you can change the preset just by a touch of a button, and it's just an incredible device.
As a drummer, I'm really picky about my mix and how my drums sound, and as well as the panning and everything, and I'm huge on just doing it myself. I always go back to the monitor board and change things myself. And I came here Sunday, and I've used systems like these before, so I was a little skeptical on the sound that they were going to provide. But after messing with them and realizing that I had the full control over every individual channel right next to me, it was huge. And sonically, it was probably one of the best sounding systems I've ever heard like this before. The fact that you can make EQs, pannings, and reverb for each individual channel was huge. And so I'm definitely sold on this system.
So that's the Drew Bodine Band